Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 4 of the Virtual Island Summit. Thank you so much for joining me this session. My name is Philip Florencio, and I am the graphic designer at Island Innovation. I'm based in Brazil. Island Innovation is a sustainable development consultancy primarily focusing on islands. Our services include island development strategies, impact program design and coordination, capacity building, events, strategic communications, and government affairs. We are trusted by clients around the globe, and if you're interested in learning more about our work, please reach out to us using the contact information available in the chat. I'm very happy to be presenting this session titled Zero Waste Islands, a Dream or a Reality? Before we begin, you should see a poll appearing now on your screen. Please let us know your gender, where you are connecting from, and the sector and industry you belong to. I see people from Nigeria, from Cabo Verde, from Mauritius, from Vanuatu, and other places. So, is a waste-free island utopia or an achievable goal? This session tackles the challenges and opportunities of creating sustainable island communities, explore initiative solutions, inspiring case studies, and the potential for islands to lead the way in circular economies. Join us to discuss the feasibility of zero waste on islands, the role of technology, and the importance of community engagement in achieving this ambitious target. I invite you to please make use of the chat function to introduce yourself and where you're joining from, and make any comments during the session. Please make sure that you use the Q&A function for any questions you might have for the panelists, and we will do our best to make sure that we can address as many as possible upon the Q&A part of the session. All right, I see we have a diverse representation of genders, and mostly coming from Europe and um, and from the private sector, and specifically the environmental services and ocean conservation. So now I'll be handing over to the moderator, Kostas Kominos, Director, DAFNI. Over to you, Kostas.
Hello, Philip. Thank you very much for the introduction, and it's indeed very interesting to see that we have a broad representation of Islanders from all over the world. Good evening from my side. I'm based in Greece. Here, the local time is 10 o'clock in the evening. I'm very happy to moderate this session. The truth is that we've been working with a big group of islands here in Greece. I suppose most of you are aware of the Greek islands with very diverse conditions. Others are very touristic, others are less touristic. Some of them are close to the mainland, others are not. So when it comes to waste management, the circular economy, and especially zero waste concept is always a challenge. In our case, in Greece, we had this, let's say, unique case. I don't know if you're familiar about with the Tilos Island. Tilos is a small island in the south east of the Aegean Sea, which is named as the first zero waste island in Europe. They have managed to do a very analytical, let's say, waste separation at the local scale at the island. It's an island of about 1,500 inhabitants in total, and they have actually managed to separate most of the waste locally, enable even chains of reuse and repurposing of the materials at local level, connect the resources with local tourism. And when the case is that they cannot actually use this waste or reuse the waste, they're exporting them to the larger island of Rhodes or in Athens. There has been a lot of exposure with this island. You can Google information about the Tilos and the Zero Waste Island. It's a very interesting experience, and we're trying to build on that also to work on other islands. I'm sure that, as we say very often, the diversity we experience in Greek islands gives us a lot of inspiration about the challenges that are met from islands all over the world. I know that many of your islands are very remote, others are close to continental countries. But in all cases, the waste is always a very difficult field to tackle. We are very much dependent on bigger geographical entities, and we also need a lot of collaboration with all the stakeholders from the production, from the producers, even at the households. The touristic sector is very difficult, let's say, to engage. However, this is a challenge that is very important to tackle. And I think that today we have a very good representation of panelists that they have very interesting cases to share with us. And I'm very happy to moderate this session and give them the floor in the next minutes. I would like to, yeah, to some small details, let's say. It's that, well, all of you are muted and without camera. There is the session of the QAs that you can actually deliver your questions along the presentations. I will try to keep a track on them and try to address them to the speakers at the Q&A session. And as you are aware, the session is recorded and live streamed on the different social media platforms. So having said that, I would like to pass the floor to our first speaker. We have a substitute of our initial announced speaker from the Repurpose Global. So we have with us Svetlana Dgoste from Repurpose Global. And Svetlana, I think you're the lead of strategic planning or strategic collaborations, if I'm not mistaken. The floor is yours to talk about the activities of Repurpose Global.
Thank you so much, Kostas. It's really indeed a pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm Svetlana, and I lead strategic partnerships and new initiatives at Repurpose. For those of us who are not very familiar with Repurpose, we are a world-leading plastic action platform, and we work really to build scalable and inclusive infrastructure in some of the world's most underserved regions, including island and coastal communities. So it's really a topic that's very close to our hearts and something that we are really happy to talk about and exchange ideas and knowledge. I did want to come into this session with a little bit of grounding because to me, this is such an important issue to be tackling, precisely because a few years ago, I met someone from a coastal island community, and he told me that unfortunately he lost his friend in a flood. And when they investigated what happened and what was the reason for that flooding, they found drains that were clogged with plastics that really contributed to this flooding situation. And it was really heart-wrenching and to hear the story and to see the impacts of something that was so easily avoidable with more planning and with better infrastructure. We didn't have to have a situation like this. And for me, that's why it became very personally important to work on this issue, because it's not just about the environment, but also about the people in these vulnerable communities. And I just wanted to start off by acknowledging how important it is to talk about circularity in islands and coastal communities. And I think all of us here can resonate with such stories, right? Can resonate with the images of marine animals entangled in plastic waste, of fishermen pulling out more plastic than fish on their trips. And I think it's really important to talk about what can we do to bring systems change into such a scenario. And this is where I'd like to share the kind of work that Repurpose has been involved in. And to give you an example, let's take Bali, right? Bali is an area we work in. We work in Dominican Republic. We've worked in coastal areas of Colombia and many other such regions. But in Bali, we have an annual plastic waste generation of over 300,000 tons, which is 3.5 times higher than what they would actually produce because of the high tourism. And only 7% of the plastic waste is actually collected or recycled today. And that means that a whopping 90% is still ending up in our landfills. People have to burn this waste in their backyards, or is directly leaking into the oceans. And when we started to think about how can we intervene in this space, right? What is the value addition that we can bring? And we realized that one common problem that we were seeing is that a lot of the funding that was being put into the waste management sector was often put for building new stuff, building new equipments, building new collection centers. But oftentimes, this infrastructure was not being used by the people because it was not designed for people and the communities and the local realities of those regions. So we felt that designing for people and building those strategic partnerships, building those public-private partnerships with local communities that also bring together the private sector, the DFIs, the informal sector in many of the global South islands, is super important for us to have something really successful. So that's on the designing for people side. And then the second part that we realized was a gap and where we could intervene is on the financing, right? We can talk a big game about impact and we can talk a big game about ambitious goals, but if we do not have a strong financial commitment backing those goals, I think the battle is lost already. And so we at Repurpose have been deploying a model called outcomes-based waste prevention. And this mechanism is really one to be able to design systems that actually bring about tangible change by understanding the baseline, by understanding how do we design for the communities that live in these regions. And the second part is really deploying innovative financial mechanisms, such as outcomes-based financing, that is tying financial incentives to actual waste prevention and environmental outcomes. And this is really what I wanted to hone in. And just going back to that Bali example, Bali has a lot of collection actually on the PET plastic bottles, but no one is really collecting the plastic bags, the shopping bags, the flexible plastics, because they don't really have a very high economic value. And so when we did our baseline and when we assessed the situation, we realized that we needed to build extra financial incentives to collect flexible plastics from the local aggregators, from the local communities, from the local informal sector. And so we were able to start building a value chain that incentivizes the collection of flexible low-value plastics and then bring it to a point where it can actually be recycled into pallets, into feedstock for more recycled materials, and then close the loop in that way. So this outcomes-based financing model, and I'm happy to double click in as we go through the session, but it's really been a game changer for us in terms of being able to mobilize finance to create impact. And it's almost a middle ground between traditional grant financing and traditional private equity and other kinds of financing, which is not so easy to deploy, but really tying this financing to outcomes which are so needed. And so far, till the reason why I'm so bullish about this model is also because in the past 4 years, Repurpose Global has been able to deploy this model to recover over 60 million pounds of plastics that would have otherwise leaked into the ocean or our natural environment, and has given livelihoods and empowerment to over 2,000 waste workers globally. And so I just wanted to present this as a high-level topic for us to all discuss. But in conclusion, I'd really like to say that it's really about empowering communities and creating community-based solutions that are backed by sustainable financing models. While we've had a lot of success in the waste management side of things, we also recognize that it's important to reduce the amount of plastics that are on the island in the first place. And so what we've launched earlier this year is something called a Reuse Outcomes Fund, which is really tying financial incentives to reducing plastic waste and incentivizing the behavior change, reverse logistics, and so on and so forth, to be able to reuse plastics on the island instead of discarding them. So I'll stop here. I don't want to overrun my time, but again, it's an honor to be here, and I'm happy to dive into the discussion and learn from my peers as well. Thanks, Kostas.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. Yeah, I think that you already touched the core, let's say, of the discussion when it comes to circular economy and enabling, let's say, the value chain of circular economy. You need to create value, and if value is not there, there's not a mobilization, let's say, of the different actors. So this is very accurate, and it's good to hear that you are working into innovative and new types, let's say, of instruments towards this direction, and we'll have more time to discuss on that on the way. So let's proceed with our next panelists. So we have with us Sanin Henry. a few words about Sanin. I think that we're going now to the textile industry, and we're going to listen about how we can actually produce clothing, Sanin, I guess, amongst others, by using bio-based materials as a basic principle. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kostas, and nice to be here with everyone and to be part of these innovative conversations. I'm Shannon Henry, and I'm the founder of the Council on Sustainable Fashion and Design of Grenada. So I do want to talk a little bit more about Caribbean SIDS and preface with the particular vulnerabilities that small island developing states face. So we think about things like rising sea levels, which most islands are facing in the face of climate change, changing weather patterns, and the remoteness from international markets. So these vulnerabilities in particular make it quite difficult to foster circular economies on Caribbean small island developing states. And so what the Council on Sustainable Fashion and Design of Grenada, or CSFDG, is doing is harnessing the power of the creative economy, that's fashion, design, architecture, to close these gaps in terms of lack of access to international markets, and to try our best to foster circular economies locally within Grenada and regionally within the Caribbean, or what we call the CARICOM region. When it comes to waste in particular, I think it's important to highlight that Grenada, the islands that we're working on, virtually has no waste management system, and no formal waste management system at least. So it makes it difficult even to assess, right, what is being done with waste on islands. Fortunately, I have a background in industrial ecology, where we focus on material flow analysis, right? And where we realize that most of the waste that is accumulated on islands is coming from import. So whether it's for the building up of the hotel and tourism industry, which makes up about 70% of some islands' GDP, or just the importation of items for locals to use. So what we would like to tackle is having higher quality products made in Grenada, products that are made from natural materials, natural fibers when it comes to fashion and design products, and having these products circulate locally instead of us relying on imports. And normally we are importing items that are primarily made of plastic. If they're wearable items, they're often made of polyester. So we're wanting to foster a community locally within the creative economy, where we've raised awareness that it is important to utilize items that are made from natural fiber materials because they have less impact on the environment, and to then also spark innovation. So as a council on fashion and design, we build community, right? So creating a space where local people feel that they can come in and talk about their innovations, and focusing on homegrown innovation, because that'll have the greatest impact in the long run. I want to go back to the focus on the 70% of the GDP for tourism and hospitality industry, and 60% of the workforce in the tourism industry is actually made up of women. So at CSFDG, we're hoping to provide an opportunity for women in particular, and women small business owners, to have a stake in the local economy in a way that is circular. And also to start to produce items and build up an alternative economy. Because with changing weather patterns, for example, we have to start to drift away from the traditional sun, sea, and sand narrative that the Caribbean states have, being some of the most beautiful places in the world. In the face of climate change, we need to subsidize losses in revenue from the tourism industry. So by creating products locally, giving people education and skills training, they now have a stake in the local economy. And then if we move forward to broader ideas like developing fibers, like next generation materials from organic waste that's produced on islands, it also is an opportunity to close that gap in remoteness, right? Now giving these Caribbean SIDS islands a stake in the global value chain, and that is, with that connection also comes a connection to resources, to capital, help with capacity building as well. So just being able to have a cross-disciplinary impact on people, while also having a positive impact on the planet. And so At CSFDG in particular, our programs really are around training and providing education and resources to women who own small businesses, because really trade and knowledge is something that you can't take away, even as we experience changing weather patterns and have to steer away from that sun, sea, and sand narrative. I just wanted to highlight circular economy in general. I'm not sure if people on this call are familiar with the barrel concept, where you have people like myself who are part of the Caribbean diaspora, and we send over a barrel that has clothes in it, it has all the necessities that people maybe need and can't find locally. We send those things over, and we don't know how they circulate, right? So we're sending over these polyester clothing that will end up in our oceans, they'll end up in landfills, or we're sending over essentials for health and wellness that could be made on the island if there was simply an investment in education, skills training locally, as opposed to, again, things are imported, they get lost in the economy. We want to change that narrative and intervene there where things are being produced locally, they're being pushed into the hotel sector so that wealth from the tourism and hotel industry is being kept on the island. And then we are allowing and fostering just homegrown innovation. So people who are part of the rum industry, for example, there's sugarcane that's used in that process, or the chocolate industry, there's the cocoa bean that's used in that process. So just thinking about these processes, how we can make them more circular by utilizing the byproducts to create next generation materials and giving Caribbean small island developing states a stake in the global circular economy via developing value-added products. So yeah, that's my take on things, and hopefully we can continue to foster those communities, but we can't do it alone. So we're looking forward to speaking about collaboration with other islands around the world, especially in the global north.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sinin. That's a very, very, very interesting work. I think we'll have more time to discuss about it and understand also what's the potential of expanding, let's say, the experience and the work you're doing from Granados to other places, because it seems as a very good example. And I see already enthusiasm also in the chat. I understand that you had already a recent event in Granada on the topic, so congratulations on that.
Yes,
I think
you.
that there are people following you on that.
Absolutely.
So let's give the floor also to our next speaker in order to have all the interventions and try to open the floor of the discussion as much as possible, and we'll come back during our panel discussion and have also our Q&A session. So our next speaker is Sabine Berendi from Green Phoenix. Sabine is the CEO of Green Phoenix, and so Sabine, yeah, you've been working for a long time in the area of the Caribbean, and you have a focus on Curaçao, as I understand, and you can provide us your experience from your work there. I understand that you're working a lot with people, a lot with social elements, a lot with education on the direction of circularity and waste management. Can you share your experience on that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. I have to correct you a little bit because indeed I have been working in the Caribbean for nearly 2 decades. That makes me sound really old. But for the last year, actually, I haven't been involved in the operations. I've been studying at the Institute of Small States, Islands and Small States Institute at the University of Malta. And I've actually been looking more deeply into what I've been working with for the last 2 days. So I've been focusing on the management of PET plastic in small island states. And so I'm very, can you see my screen?
We can see your screen. If you want, you can go into full screen, presentation mode.
So you can see it now? The full
Excellent.
screen?
Yes, we can see full screen.
Great.
The floor is yours.
That helps. So because my experience is mostly in plastic, I would like to focus also this presentation or this talk about plastic. And I think for here, framing is very important. Like Shannon said in the first talk, it's so much more than an environmental issue. It's also about people, but it's about economics, but it's about livelihood. It has intergenerational impact. There are scientists that are saying that it should be categorized as a hazardous waste. And there are also a lot of researchers that have been looking at it from a colonial perspective, which was very eye-opening for me. And the way we frame plastic is really essential also for the type of solutions that we can come up with. And you know, when we talk about plastic, usually people think about, oh, there's just a lot of things of plastic, but it's actually a term that incorporates a lot of different materials, similar to like wood and glass. You have PET, you have HDPE, you have PP, and a lot of different polymer types that all have different characteristics, different applications, different life cycles, and consequently also different type of recycling technology that they require. So in the 1956, there was this very innovative business idea. Let's start with single-use plastic, because then as a corporation, we can move billions of products through households instead of moving or putting 1,000 products into a household, meaning that you can make a lot of more revenue, more profit. So that actually started people off to consume more, use more, and ultimately also dispose of more different types of materials. And for islands, which are very specific because of their geographical isolation, they're far away from logistics, that poses a problem, because usually islands don't have the resources that are necessary for handling all these wastes that are generated. So most of the islands work with a landfill still. So that means that plastic is just going to be brought to one central place, everything is mixed, and there it will remain in the environment. Plastic doesn't biodegrade, so it will stay there, and it will just break down in smaller and smaller pieces, becoming more bioavailable over time, meaning that we're setting our future generations up to deal with a much bigger problem even. So there's this very interesting thing, right? Because these corporations think, oh, let's move billions of products through households, let's send them to islands, and then people can benefit from the products. But it also means that packaging waste transforms across borders, plastic pollution transforms over borders. But in many of the Western countries, there is such a thing called extended producer responsibility, meaning that if you put a product in the market, it's known that it will cause a cost to the society. So the producers or the importers have to pay some fee that the municipalities, that the country can manage the waste that is generated from the use of that product properly. Curacao, the island that I've been living for almost 2 decades, is part of the Dutch kingdom. The historical, of the history of the kingdom makes that there are still lots of trades between the Netherlands and the Caribbean islands of the Dutch kingdom. About 25% of our products come from the Netherlands, where there is this extended producer responsibility. And you would assume that if then the producers know that they have to bear responsibility for what they put in the market, then the island could benefit as well. But the responsibility stops at the European border. For me, that's very, very strange. And I think, you know, posing the original question, you know, a dream or a reality, I think our current reality for most of the islands around the world is that we are drowning in plastic. And I think that we focus too much on solutions that seem nice, but are a scalar mismatch to the gravity or the enormousness of the problem of plastic waste, which ultimately becomes pollution. And that might sound very doom and gloom, but I think that there's a simple way out. If we install the extended producer responsibility, we'll have much more funding available. If we install closed loop reverse logistics, that means that whatever is put on the island, the packaging will go back to the place where it's originating from, where there is the technology. Because our major problem is that we don't have recycling facilities on the small islands, and the markets are too small to make these investments. Yeah, this is, I think, a way that we can move forward in the direction of plastic waste-free islands. And I think that it's very important that to make this a reality, islands put it higher in the priority list, because our livelihoods depend on it. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sabine. It's indeed waste management and circular economy is enabled through the right policy framework, and when it comes to islands that they are, as you said, dependent on other continental areas. As I said also in my introduction, things can start getting quite complicated. So as you said, the problem is that the policy framework stops at continental Europe, and there should be a solution found when it comes to applying the policy and regulation also in many cases also under adapted, let's say, conditions to islands. And this could be, let's say, also the foundation and the enabling framework to apply the rest of them, the policies and the projects. We'll get back to that in our panel discussion. Let me introduce our next speaker. We have with us Justin Maggi, which is a research director at the Ulster University. A few words about our professor. Is an award-winning designer and academic, and he's been having an expertise, let's say, on design-driven innovation and knowledge exchange, and quite an activity, let's say, when it comes to islands with a future island project. Justin, we're happy to have you with us. Can you share us your experience? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. My video seems to be paused by the host. Oh, here we go. That's it on now. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my presentation here as well, Costas.
That's very good. Let's have it.
Can you see that?
Yep, it's coming, and you can go in full screen and just try to use our few minutes because you're running a little late on our plan.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll start my stopwatch here as well. So I'm going to talk to you about valorizing waste, co-design with Rathlin Island, and this is part of the Future Island project, which is one of 4 green transition ecosystems which are funded by the Arts and Humanity Research Council in the UK and the Design Museum. So they're very much design-based, looking for real-world solutions. Ulster University lead this consortium. There's four universities. There's 12 company co-investigators, one of which is Rathlin Development Community Association. And you can see from the graphic on the left, we're quite a diverse array of disciplines. So we're all about design-led research, developing an eco-friendly approach for Northern Ireland by managing waste as a commodity and enhancing sustainable tourism through digital technologies. And we're working with a small population on Rathlin Island of approximately 160 people. And that's kind of a lens to see what solutions are possible to scale up for Ireland, UK, Europe and beyond. Our 5 work packages, I just run through some of these. The first one is about plastics and waste electronic electrical equipment. The second is using games technologies, virtual production and animation to try to come up with new sustainable ways of tourism. The third is about nature-based systems. So this is looking at things like land, food, water, and that nexus, and can we approach those differently? We have education running through this because we want to explore from schools through to universities and skilling up community and connecting any of the findings from the other work packages. And then within policy, it's about, not only is it about trying to come up with new policy, but responding and mobilizing existing policies to enable change. So I'm going to give you just a couple of visual examples of the type of things we're exploring. In product waste, we started off with a number of engagements with Rathlin community. There was 7 meetings where we talked and tried to understand the needs. From that, we devised 21 more concise kind of project briefs to frame those issues, and generated a number of sketches and ideas as a stimulus for conversation. And from that, we got a number of meaningful conversations where there are types of projects we could try and move forward with. And you can see on the right there, little red and green dots and so on. And this was a means by which we could co-design with the community. We started looking then at some conceptualization of possible products for discussion, introducing 3D print as an exploratory technology for the island, and put that to use for some examples. For instance, on the far right, there's an ancient artifact that is not on display. It belongs to one of the families in the island. We could scan it, we could make a replica of it, then that could be used in a tourist scenario while sharing some of the heritage of the island. Another element was looking at where are the plastics, where do they come from on the island, and beach waste is a big issue. So we conducted a beach clean to look at the types of materials that were on that beach. We then started rationalizing that to how could we categorize those into useful materials that are predictably collected. And from those harvested, we looked at the compliance rates. We have a new system we put in place to help collect this information or collect the materials. And we want to scale that up on a wider beach clean next week, actually, across Northern Ireland and Donegal to get a greater volume of material. And then we're going to take that through and process it. So here's kind of that method. So it's a visually aided method where we clearly instruct how to categorize the collection of waste. And then each of those pieces of waste, be it twine, braided rope, or rigid plastics, have families of polymers. And we can turn those into things like a 3D printed filament in the labs. On the left-hand side, you'll see there's a digital animation. This is actually from some of the scanned topology of the land as well. But we would use this in education context where while going on an underwater journey, people are made aware of the issues of plastics both above and below the water, and giving them some facts and some ideas on how to approach this as a society. So in terms of organic waste systems, wool is another area where there's quite a bit of waste. We established a wool hub on the island. So there's 15 people from farming background, craft background, who have an interest in doing something more productive with it. And we've taken 1,500 kilos off as a test pilot and are washing and processing that. We're also upskilling the community in terms of using natural-based items on the island to make natural dyes. And we come up with a palette of the colours of Rathlin. So it's very authentic to the island. And then we have an authentic product that's created that can be used to develop commercial products to feed the economy. Our knowledge exchange has been very much two-way. We've had some festivals on the island where the community can get involved and we can bring some ideas to them. And then the community have come to the university and other locations to share with the wider geography of the area. We also have some work presented internationally, for instance, here about policy at the Design Research Society in Boston. We also use design as to visualize complexity. So on the left-hand side, you'll see here, these are the more than minutes. They're a visual way by which the Rathlin community engage with problems. We've done a deep analysis of that. And we also use design, as you can see, on the right-hand side, to try and look through the ecosystem and plan for the future, and look at and find patterns and ways of scaling up. And finally, we have fellowships that we've put towards the island. The Creative Rathlin Fellowships are where we give funding to the island community for them to be an active part of the project and come up with their own ideas. And there will also be a residency happening on the island in a few weeks' time, where they're looking at more strategic and futuristic projects. We're a year in and looking forward to working with the Rathlin development community over the next year. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Justin, for the very inspiring presentation. I must admit that I was not familiar with Rathlin Island. I Googled it while you were presenting. It's a nice gem there at the North Ireland. We are very lucky to work with them. Small population, but for sure quite significant to maintain the population and give motivation. Yeah, let's come back to that also with in our panel. I mean, you know, there are all islands, but you know, they're very small islands, they're bigger islands, they're islands in different climates and different governance conditions. Let's go to our last panelist. We are happy to have with us Lou. Lou, I think I will say your first name. No, I will try the full name. It's Lou Tamajo Plovier. It's a senior development manager for circular economy. Lou, we're already behind the schedule. I hope I was close to you pronouncing your name. The floor is yours.
Right. Thanks, Costas. Yeah, quite close. Yeah, quite close indeed. I'm actually from Tahiti in French Polynesia, so it's a Tahitian name. So yeah, my name is Lou Tamajo Plovier, and yeah, I think I'll be able to keep it shorter than intended. I think the panelists before me really did a great job at setting the stage and highlighting what is the situation and what are the main challenges when we talk about waste-free islands. So me personally, I've been working in the field of circular economy for the past 10 years, and yeah, being originally from French Polynesia, this topic is very close to my heart. And right now, I'm working for Circle Economy, which is an organization based in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, that's been leading the research and advocacy in the field for about 15 years now. And I work for them as a development manager, so looking at providing circular indicators to new territories and new industries. But yeah, so for me to look into this topic, actually going to talk about two different analyses that I took part in. The first one was when I was living in Tahiti, in French Polynesia. We conducted an analysis that was looking at the waste management system and practices in remote island of French Polynesia. So to give you an idea, French Polynesia is like more than 100 islands in the middle of the Pacific and spread across, a maritime territory that is about the size of Europe. So all the challenges are present there, like small population, very very dispersed, classic problematic that we have in island. And the second one is an analysis that we conducted with the circular economy, which was a circular economy analysis of the tourism industry in the Balearic Island. And well, the main finding and highlight that that we can see across these two different analyses is the fact that the main challenge identified to be able to implement a circular economy in these islands is the lack of infrastructure and the lack of availability for waste processing and reverse logistic. But in a way, looking at the situation and highlighting this as the main barrier is also looking at the problem, just addressing the symptoms. And actually, like a lot of the strategies and impact that could be done would actually be on strategies that would permit to reduce not having the waste in the island on the first place. So how can we actually reduce our dependencies on these global value chains that end up creating the waste on the islands. And in a way, that's really where circular economy and circular business models can play a big role in making a shift in islands. So here the idea would actually be to create these circular business models that would look at the needs and the demands locally on the island, and how can we create businesses that would leverage the local resources to answer the local needs, and in a way like reducing that import of waste. And yeah, maybe another point that I wanted to also put forward, and that we saw in these analysis, and I think it resonates a bit with what Shannon Henry was saying at the beginning, is that well, compared to the analysis that we do at Circle Economy with mainland nations, it's quite impressive to see the role of the tourism industry plays in the local economy. So we can really see that for touristic islands, we can really see that there's one industry that is really leading the economy, and that is in place with already a lot of stakeholders gathered around them. So in a way, it really creates the ecosystem is already existing, and therefore we have one economy and one industry that has a lot of potential for circular economy implementation. If we compare to mainland nation, it's much more fragmented when we look at the national pictures. It's very rare to find a nation that will have one industry that is representing 70% of the economy. And also the fact that that we're talking about the tourism industry, it's also an industry that is very interesting because it connects with a lot of other industries, everything related to construction, to transport, and everything. So it really sets that ecosystem. But that's something that we saw when we were doing our research in French Polynesia, is that often the tourism industries can be lacking government support, but also legislative structure. So we saw during our analysis that a lot of hotels and touristic establishments were trying to implement policies, better waste management, but that often their actions was limited to their infrastructure. For example, hotels would need to sort their waste in order to get their certifications a certain way, and they would do it, but then when their waste sorted would go into the infrastructure of the municipality of the island, then all the waste would end up in the landfill. So there's really a big mismatch there, and I think that one of the main leverage that could be used is actually trying to support these tourism industries that have really a huge incentive and pressure to move towards more sustainable businesses, and for government and legislation to support that. Thank you.
Excellent. Lou, thank you very much for your intervention. To be sincere, that was the topic that I had actually picked to discuss in the panel discussion. So the truth is that, as we said, we're all islands, but we come from different conditions. But in most cases, what is common among islands is the fact that the economy is very often dependent on tourism. I can tell you from my experience in Greece, what we're currently discussing in Greece, but also in other, let's say, touristic destinations in Europe, is over-tourism. And so what's the impact actually of tourism in the infrastructure and the islands themselves when it comes also to waste? And I would like to hear from our panelists and their comments about how do they see their field and their business, let's say, or their solutions being influenced, or their islands being influenced by tourism, whether they consider it as Lou mentioned, as potential enabling, let's say, condition if regulated properly, or if a framework is provided, or if a collaboration with the local authorities is in place that can actually activate and mobilize change, and take into consideration that in islands tourism is very much dominant in many cases, or whether we are very much doomed also because of tourism, because of the being over flooded by people and bringing even more resources, and then being in a vicious cycle, let's say, of not being possible to manage our waste. So I would like to give the floor as we started our discussion with Svetlana, and give us any one of you and the rest of you, you give a thought about the question, how you see tourism influencing either your island, your business, or your ideas. Svetlana, and I would like to ask from each one of you to have 1 minute, and in parallel, just make a quick check on the QA session, because there are some questions that are left for some of you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kostas. I think that's a very interesting question, and it could have repercussions depending on, how tourism is managed in that particular island, and what policies and what regulations are in place. So in many of the places that we work, there are talks about having more tourism tax. There's talk about more environmental taxes, and that's in a way can be used to galvanize more financing towards, say, circularity infrastructure, right? There is a lot of talk about extended producer responsibility and these kinds of things, which can then account for the tourism consumption as well on the area, because then it's linked to consumption. It's not really linked to just the number of people on the island. And so I think these are interesting concepts that can be brought into the fray in order to ensure that we're also considering this additional footprint that tourists bring on board. I do think tourists are also a great way to engage them in a lot of eco-conscious activities. I think we talk a lot about, if you look at the kind of tourism, I was in the Canary Islands last year and working on a sustainability and circularity project there. And we see that the kind of tourism that the island of La Palma attracted was tourists which were very eco-conscious, and they wanted to have those experiences. They wanted to live in local houses. They wanted to spend that time exploring a lot of ecotouristic options. And I think if that is brought into the sustainable development plan and vision for the island, it can really be a force for good. So I think there's
Maybe a driving force there, yeah.
absolutely, but I'll let my colleagues chime in as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Svetlana. I'm sorry, we have a short time. Thank you very much for your comment there. I would like to give the floor to Shannon, and tell us how you see tourism influencing your industry, and the whole discussion and the examples that you presented. I think they're very much linked potentially also with the demand that they can come with clients potentially also coming on the island and being served by the products that you're producing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's necessary, and when we talk about sustainable and circular products that being developed on Caribbean islands, we almost have to have a collaboration with the hotel and tourism sector, because that is where most of the revenue is generated. We've actually successfully, just this past August, had something simple, which was just a pop-up shop in a hotel. So it was the first hotel to have a shop that had only locally made items. And there were beautiful, high-quality things. And so what that does, again, is keeping some of the wealth on the island, but we can also set standards internally as a nonprofit to say, okay, you cannot use these materials because they're not great for the environment for this reason. It does attract this conscious consumer. The hotel guests were elated to come in and find things that weren't made in China and made in the UK, but that were made by hand on island. And then even more impactful is that tourists are now taking these items off island, and they're able to spread the word and raise awareness of the vulnerability that exists. But mostly it is having to do with keeping wealth on island so that we can be innovative and also sort of self-finance our innovations, but we will always need collaboration and help. So hospitality and tourism sector goes really hand in hand with developing circular products, whether they're wearable products, cosmetics products, and otherwise. And those are the members of our community at CSFDG, these small business owners who are doing their best to create people and planet-friendly products. And we look forward to continuing to highlight that with all of our hotel partnerships in Grenada and regionally as well.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Yeah, that was my expectation, Sina, that in your case, I mean, the tourism could be actually in a very enabling, let's say, condition for your market. And yeah, good work there, and continue that. And Sabine, coming to you, and yeah, but a clear understanding there. I mean, you know, with the plastic and you know, islands continue to be over flooded, and it's one of the materials that is very often quite difficult, let's say, to put into the circularity and bring it back, and especially make it exploitable at the level of an island. You know, mainly we need to export it back to the mainland. But how do you see tourism potentially influencing that? I mean, you know, tourism industry still requires a lot of plastic, and for sure, visitors bring a lot of plastic with them. What is your opinion on that?
I think it's a very difficult, actually a very difficult question, because tourism brings the opportunity for cultural exchanges, revenue for the local community, which are important factors. But the amount of waste that they generate or that they produce, as well as the environmental degradation that comes from it, and they very often don't realize, you know, the cost to the island. And it takes a very forward thinking and long-term thinking to, you know, sustain it in a way. And that worries me sometimes. I have to say, it's very difficult to keep balancing it in the right way.
Yeah, so it's not an easily solvable equation for sure. And it translates in many ways. It influences all the life of islanders very often. So you cannot easily put them in the loop if the you know the benefits of the economy is very much based on tourism. I totally understand it. Justin, what about your experience from Rathlin? But I guess also from other islands. I guess that still tourism and actually communicating in the right way to the visitor, the message about the vision of the island is very important.
You've just read my mind. And that's exactly the thing. I think education and preparing expectations and trying to help tourists understand what a visit and what an experience to that island should be, and what comes with that is how they want that the island to be treated, and perhaps as well learn something, take something away about more sustainable behavior back home, and then that sort of, you know, spreads that way of living elsewhere, because I think islands tend to have a much more healthy attitude. They're much more aware of sustainable issues than people in more built up areas. And yeah, so I think sharing that educational experience and preparing their audience, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that yeah, islanders can become gradually a lifestyle influencers, you know.
Yeah.
And Lou, well, the ball back to you. I mean, you threw the ball about you know the influence of tourism. That was a very good pass, and I appreciate it. So how do you see actually the next step for tourism? Do you see the big difference also among the different islands? I mean, you've been from French Polynesia, but I think that you have a broad understanding of the different conditions. How do you see tourism? Is it I don't know, is the benefit of this, is it doomsday for the islands?
Yeah, I think, yeah, like everyone said, it's really hard in islands, especially like French Polynesia, like also like it's really like the main income for most families. So removing that is, you know, it's a really tricky subject. But the way that I see it is more that, you know, we if we look at circular economy as a systemic change, we have that biggest consumer and, you know, richest industry, that is tourism. So, you know, I think often like a lot of the efforts are made towards the tourists and, you know, the activities around tourists themselves, but not necessarily around the tourism as an industry. So, you know, if we start having circular food system that can, you know, go towards the restaurants and the hotels, and if we can have circular infrastructure to build the hotel, and really seeing more of the systemic change and using the tourism as like the main industry, then you know, if we look at it from that perspective, it really has like, you know, the power, the network, the stakeholders there to be able to implement change. So
that's very good. That's very good, Lou. I totally agree with you on that. Yeah, and some small remarks and closing remarks from my side. We are already out of our time. Unfortunately, we received very good comments on the chat though, and I'm happy for you and thank you to all the participants and the panelists for the great interventions. What I want to share is that what we've been working for many years with islands. We work at the national but also European level. But what we see is that what actually resonates with the island is integrated intervention. So waste and circular economy always comes together with water. We need to have energy. We need to have the right way of transportation. So we need ecosystemic, let's say, interventions that actually give answers to the locals. And for sure, tourism as an activity is very intensive. But if we find the ways, let's say, to deliver the energy in the right way, collect the waste in the right way, close the loops at the local or archipelagic scale, or in the proximity with a mainland, we're going to create very good examples for the rest of the world. That was very nice. I was very nicely impressed by your graph there, Justin. I would like to close with that. We're having Rathlin, Ireland, and then UK and the word I lost it. But we'd like to see as islands as living labs and as areas of inspiration for the rest of the world. And I think you're all contributing towards this direction. Thank you very much for this excellent session. And yeah, I look forward to meeting you in other opportunities. The word is back to Philippe from Island Innovation to close this session from the side of the organizers. Thank you.
I would like to thank the moderator Costas and the speakers Svetlana, Shannon, Sabine, Justin, and Lou for this insightful session and a very interesting conversation. For you all who might have missed it, we announced very exciting news during our opening session. Island Innovation is partnering with the government of St. Kitts and Nevis to host the Global Sustainable Island Summit. After this year's experience in Prince Edward Island in Canada, now the Caribbean takes the spotlight. This summit will be held from the 27th to the 29th of 2025. We will be discussing solutions and advancements in sustainable energy. Please note that all attendees of the Virtual Island Summit can get an additional discount on the early bird ticket using the coupon VIS2024. I will say it again, VIS2024. Check out the chat for more details. Our next session will be Voices from the Atlantic, Endless Possibilities, Fogo Islands Community Economic Development, coming up in 1 hour. Thank you.